Ombreing with glitters, especially ones with irregular shards, can be a little bit tricky, but I'm going to help you today. What's up, nail crew? It's Nicole, your fellow nail obsessed DIYer. Today we are going to do a mani with these two beautiful colors from CN Designer Dips. Fleur is the light pale pink, and then Sparks Fly is the glitter. It's a fine glitter with these iridescent shards, and they're kind of like irregular shaped. I know a lot of people have been asking me like they're struggling with glitter or any of these irregular pieces, and I'm going to help you learn how to ombre with them and get them to lay flat on your nails when you just do them alone. So I'm starting with Fleur, and one thing that I really try to do when I'm doing a really soft solid dip, especially if it's a little bit sheer, is I really try hard to get my dip base to be even. So you can see as I'm dipping here, the color looks super even. Part of that is the quality of the dips, and the other part is making sure that you apply that dip base really nice and evenly. So that's something I like to focus on when I'm doing sheer or light color dips. And since I'm going to be doing an ombre from the cuticle area up, on my second dip of the light color, I don't go all the way back to my cuticles. This way it leaves a little bit of space for the thickness of the glitter back at the back near your cuticle, and then it won't be so thick. It's still giving you like that nice curved effect. I always make sure that I brush off my dip really, really well in between layers because I don't want them to be any thicker than they need to be. So some of the ways, like I've seen a lot of people ask, like, well, how do you keep your layers thin? It starts one with good liquids. And then you want to make sure that you really apply the liquids thinly. And so what does that mean? Like what I like to do is before I even pull the liquid out of the bottle, I like to wipe a majority of it off on the inside of like the rim, never on the outside because then, that could like get the bottle stuck and you can't open it. But on the inside of the rim, you wipe off some of the excess so you're not putting so much on your nail from the start. And then what you want to do when you're dipping like a glitter or these irregular iridescent like chunk shards that I'm using, you want to put it into some kind of either dip cup like I have. These are from SJ3, or you can use a cupcake liner if you don't have dip cups. And what I try to do for each layer, when it's these irregular shards, I really try to get as much of the iridescent shards up to the top of the dip before I lay my nail flat into it. So when you're working with chunky glitters, like the bigger, thicker glitter pieces, you don't want to get a ton of them up on the first dip. You just want to get more of them up on the second so they're not so thick. But when you're working with flakes or foils, like these are iridescent glitter shards, then you want to get as much of them on both dips as you possibly can so your nail doesn't look as sparse, since you want like that, all those iridescent shards to really pop. So what I do is I take my dip cup and I kind of shake it up and like tap it against the surface that I have it on, and then those pieces come up to the top. And I do that for both layers just so I can get as much of the flaky goodness as possible up at the top on both layers. I feel like that just really gives the dip so much more dimension. Like if you tried to pour these over, you're not going to get as many of the iridescent flakes. And once that your nail starts to dry a little after you've laid your nail flat onto it, then I take a piece of tape on one of my fingers on my opposite hand, and I really try to press those shards down. So if you try to press down right away as soon as you dip, then you're going to end up pulling some off. But if you let it dry for just a little bit, then you can really press those down well. And it's super important to brush off the excess in between dips. That's just going to help to keep your nails not as chunky, especially, anytime you're using glitters, flakes, foils. Now, what I noticed too for some of the nails, it was for my thumb and my pinky, there were some areas that still to me felt a little bit sparse. Like I want those iridescent shards to be everywhere. So what I did was I took this flexible plate that's also from SJ3, and I'll link everything that I use in the description. I always do that, whether I say it or not. I took some of the dip and then just placed a few of the extra glitter shards down so that it would really fill in and be everywhere. Now we get to start on this gorgeous ombre, and I'm going to tell you what I did wrong and things that I did right. So when I first apply my dip base down for the tapping of the glitters, I try not to get base all the way down to the tip. And what I did wrong at first was I forgot to tilt my hand down. So when you're doing an ombre from the cuticle area, you want to tilt your hand down a little bit just so that like the glitter and everything can kind of fall downwards. I was trying to be really careful because it was such a dark dip that I knew the ombre would kind of get out of control. So I feel like I put my finger upwards too much instead of downwards, and it ended up like really kind of almost leaving a line in the middle of my nail. So what I tried to do then was I tilted it down, tapped a little bit extra so it would look more like it was falling. And then since the iridescent shards didn't really fall onto my nail so well, they kind of just fell off, I had to go and hand place a bunch. So that is my trick to doing any kind of irregular glitters, iridescent shards, anything like that, is when you go and you hand place a bunch, it's going to look so much better. And if you get too much down towards the tip of your nail, I just use the orange wood stick and I kind of pushed any of the excess back, kind of like scraped it off so it would look more ombre and less like, a full nail that I had dipped in it. I did go a little bit heavy on both nails for how far up I wanted the ombre. I just, honestly, half the time that I'm doing my nails, I'm just so tired. I do them at night sometimes, and even when I'm doing them during the day, I'm like rushing, trying to, get them done before I go pick up my kids from school. So I tend to go a little bit heavy on ombres. I even took my metal cuticle pusher to try to like scrape off some of the dips so it would look more ombre and less like I was trying to do a half nail color block. And adding the iridescent shards in all over and then adding them down into like where it really ombres, that helped so much for my ombre to look nicer. That is huge for me on how I get my iridescent irregular shaped shards or regular shaped glitters, chunky glitters. That's how I get them to look so nice, by doing a lot of hand placing. Yes, it takes more time than just doing like a regular ombre of two solid colors, but to me, it just ends up looking so cool at the end that it is totally worth it. And then I like to let it dry before I go and touch it. So I went through and like brushed off any excess anywhere, made sure that everything, was looking how I wanted it to, pressed down the other nails just to make sure that I got it all situated where I wanted it. This next step of adding clear dip powder as your final layer is an absolute must for me. I do clear as my last layer for really every single kind of dip that I use, regardless of whether it's a solid shimmer, flake, foil, glitter, whatever. But when you're doing any kind of glitter, flakes, foils, it is even more important, because if you try to activate and then buff, and you're somebody who likes to buff a lot, you're going to buff right through your design. Sometimes what can happen with glitters is they turn like this weird silver, and then when you do an ombre, you could accidentally buff through and your shards are going to like be buffed off. So after you work so hard to do your nails, to me, you definitely don't want to mess them up by over buffing into your glitters or whatever color you're doing. That's why I make sure that I put a really nice layer of clear dip powder down, and it is totally covering the dip. This way, when I go to file and shape, the clear has already got into like all the little nooks and crannies, and I'm just smoothing everything out. I like to apply a little bit heavier activator regardless of the brand that I'm using. So I do like 2 passes of activator on each nail just to make sure that the activator really gets all the way down. And then once the activator is dry, I go through with like these flexible files and really buff it nice and smooth. Then I'll go around my nails with a hand file just to make sure that my shape is looking nice. When you add dip to your nails, it adds bulk. So I always end up going a little bit thinner on my builder gel that I have as a base on my nails. I go in like a little bit skinnier than I actually want my nail to look, because I know that once I add dip, it's going to add some bulk to it and add some thickness. I like to do the buffing first, and then I'll go around with a fan file, and then I like to use these little cuticle sealing bits that I found on Amazon. I'll make sure I link those too in the description. I go around and make sure that my cuticle lines are really nice and even. That is my secret that I literally do not keep secret. I don't keep anything secret, okay? I am not about gatekeeping. I am anti-gatekeeping. So I'm going to give you all my tips and tricks, tell you all the things, show you my mistakes, the good, the bad, everything. That's just, that's just how I roll here. Once you have finished with all your buffing, shaping, and filing, you want to spray your nails or wipe them with isopropyl alcohol so you can get all the dust off them. This way, when you go to top coat, you don't have any of that stuck. And then once the isopropyl alcohol dries, you can go in with the top coating. Now I'm using CN's dip liquids, and the way that their dip liquids work is you apply activator to 5 nails. And then once you get to that 5th nail, you wait 60 seconds, then go back to the first nail and do your first layer of top coat. Your first layer of top coat should always be 2 to 3 quick, thin, even strokes. And no matter what brand I'm using, I like to float the top coat over my nails. I just found that it is way less likely to get contaminated doing this. And then once you're done with that first coat, you wait 60 seconds again. So I just set timers on my phone to make sure that I am timing the top coating right before I go in for my second layer and first as well. Come join me in this next video as we learn how to ombre chunky glitters. Thanks for joining me today, nail crew.